Hello chess friends, this is FIDE Master Valery Lvov, and in our lecture today I want to continue with the presentations on the attacking chess and some of the basics that we have to use in our games in order to attack successfully. So today I want to show you my game that was played recently, the Bulgarian under men's championship at 2009, and of course this was the final, so there were many grandmasters and very strong international masters participating on that event. So fortunately I qualified it from the semifinals, and eventually I played against a lot of important and very popular grandmasters over there. And in fact there is a bad fact that literally I was very sick in most of the tournaments. So in most of the games that I played, in fact I played with kind of half power, so I wasn't really able to concentrate and play in a kind of good way with all my powers. So it was the reason why I got to really good positions in most of the games, but I made stupid blunders and I was losing. But however, I made some really great games over that tournament, especially most of them were against stronger players like 25-80, and one of them was against an international master, a very experienced young international master. So it was played in the 7th round, and in the same time basically I was very sick just before the game, so I knew that having black pieces in this game against that experienced international master, I'm not gonna hold if I really played something quiet and just develop my pieces in the easy way. So sooner or later he will simply outplay me. And moreover, I know that it was a really strong positional player, so he won even grandmasters over there with very solid positions. So I decided that my only chance to improve and eventually take some advantage of this game will be to attack him. So I considered such a scheme that I can play so that I can employ some attack against this king and eventually to use this attack to take advantage, because when attacking, you don't have to think about many complicated things. You need to think about the attacking possibilities and mostly to consider the principles. So I had black, and actually my opponent played d4, so he started with this, and the system that I have prepared was actually the Dutch defense with f5. As you probably know, the Dutch defense have very good potential. In most of the variations, they have very good potential to attack the king, because basically through the pawn on f5, most of black's pieces can turn into the king's side. So eventually, when black develops with knight f6, brings one of the pawns, castles, then he can play queen e8 to h5. And as you will see in this game, black can take advantage of his pawns to create even some pawn storm over there. So my opponent played knight f3, and I continued with knight f6, and after c4, in this game I played g6 in the so-called Dutch Leningrad. So the Leningrad variation Dutch is one of the most aggressive lines, so it provides black with stable position. The bishop on g7 actually controls a little bit the squares on e5 and d4, and this way he doesn't really allow white to strike in center or maybe create some dangerous threats against black's position. So in fact, when he does it like that, what is happening is that white's strategy is going to be possible, like against black's position, only if he develops his pieces. So black can use this time to promote a kind of fast attack against the black king, even if he doesn't have most of his pieces developed, just because the position is closed. So let me show you what I mean. After g6, my opponent played bishop to b4, the pawn to b4, and this is one very interesting line. In reality, what white wants to do is to take away some space on the queen side so that he can play bishop b2 plus queen b3 next moves, and in fact the b4 pawn will be already set for some kind of queen side attack later on, where when he develops most of his pieces. The only problem is that this kind of long move with the pawn on b2 to b4, it's creating some weaknesses, and especially it will force white to lose some more tempo. So eventually his king could be in trouble. So it's a kind of perfect position that he would like to get. But let me show you. After b4, I played bishop to g7, and white played bishop to b2. So right after that, I castled, of course, one of the logical ideas. So I have something like the King's Indian with a pawn in f5. It takes away the control over at e4 and even provides me with some additional upper hand chances on the king's side. So after castling, white played g3. I played the move pawn up to d6, and white played bishop to g2. Right now, the major lines in this position are for black to continue with c6. And in reality, what he does is that when white castles, he plays something like king to h8. The basic idea behind that line is that eventually, when white develops some knight b to d2, black wants to play bishop to e6. Then he takes the bishop back to eg8 if it's threatened. Like he might play knight to d7 at this point. If white starts with a4, he can play queen c7, and after he finishes up the development of his pieces, he can start promoting something like e7 to e5. Like in this position, it's even possible to play bishop to g8. And in reality, considering that c4 is basically hanging, black can play something like e7 to e5 and continue the plan against white. There is also h7 to h6, bishop h7, and g6 to g5, so the bishop will play some significant role. A lot of very interesting unorthodox plans are possible by black. So in this game, I chose another very interesting plan that is possible, and instead of going like with c6, queen c7, and such kind of slow plan, I pointed my plan in a concrete direction, and this is the white's king side. So what I did was that after the move bishop to g2, I employed my queen up to e8. So the idea is to maneuver that queen with h6, then g5 up to h5, and eventually to represent it against the king side. So when if white king castles over there, my piece would be already set for some kind of pawn storm or maybe some kind of piece combinations over that side of the board. So I can follow my play over that area. So that's more like a risky line, but still it was my only chance to play here. So I wanted to attack on every price, and my opponent played castles. I continued with h6, and after knight b to d2, I simply played pawn up to g5. Now already, black's ideas are becoming too clear. The queen wants to go on h5, the pawn wants to jump from f5 to f4, and black will open up a possibility to bring up the light square bishop from c8 to h3, so thus exchanging white's fianchetto bishop, the strong protector of the king, and additionally following it with very strong threats. So that's a kind of very useful idea. What white did was to play queen c2, and now I simply played the move of queen to h5 right now. Now already we see a move that white can play, and that's too obvious, the move of e2 to e4. However, if white goes with something like e2 to e4 right now, it wouldn't be so well supported. I can even go with f takes e, and after knight takes e4, I can simply pin that knight with the simple bishop to f5. Now this knight is in trouble, and if white plays knight takes f6 and rook takes f6, maybe then move like bishop to h3 will follow, also knight d7, continuation, and rook a to f8 will come up. So white's bishop as well as the knight and his king side will be really weakened. So many weak squares will actually arise after the exchange of light square bishops, and in my opinion, the f-file could also be used by black to create really strong attack over there. So instead of going this way, white decided that it would be a better idea if he supports a move like e4. So in this position, what he did was to play the move rook f to e1. Now, what white wants to do is to play e2 to e4, and let me tell you why this move seems so strong. First of all, a2 to e4 will be a really strong idea because to follow the principle, which says always when you consider that your opponent is beginning attack against your flank, especially against your king, think about the counter break in the center. Because via counter-breaking the center, you can put some problems against the opponent's attack. So you either create some threats which he will have to think about, like he will have to defend against those threats and leave his attack or at least delayed for some time, or the other possibility could be that you will switch your pieces from one side of the board, like the queen side, to the king side via the center. So that could be a very interesting idea, and that's exactly what White wants to do. He wants to strike in the center, and every chess master knows that striking the center is actually the most effective way to fight against a kind of diversion or even a flank attack, which I've begun. So in this position, I actually notice that there is no time to prepare more. So I have to start with the direct threats and eventually prepare it during the time of my attack. So I played f4, and here I decided to use the principle that time is everything, and eventually to bring up the pieces in the time when the opponent will eventually defend from my own threats. So in this direction, f4 seems quite logical. I'm opening up bishop h3. However, now bishop h3 wouldn't really be so strong as before, simply because his rook is not on f1 anymore, and after bishop h3, he can simply take the bishop back over to h1. So what my opponent did was simply to employ his e2 pawn up to e4. Now, if I go with something like bishop h3 in this, if I go with something like f takes e3, my opponent can play rook takes e3, attack over to e7, then play rook a to e1, and in fact, I don't really have any certain threats. If I go with rook f7, maybe to support that pawn, rook a to e1 is following. Okay, I'm going to play bishop h3, or to just take that bishop back. So what do I have? Nothing at all. Now white will strike with d5 probably next move, or even c5. I don't have enough much pieces to protect this, to defend these threats and to protect my pawns. So in fact, my pieces will get stuck on the king side, and I will have no way to break his king side bastions. So this is why I decided that it would be a much better idea if after e4 I don't really take care of what he's doing. So I decided to play bishop h3 and to follow my plan with every move. So this way at least I can save more time and maybe provide some threats against the white's king. So bishop to h3, and in this position, seeing that I want to exchange the light square bishop and maybe jump with knight g4, White decided to continue his strategy. So after the move bishop to h3, he decided to play e5. And in fact, now we see the threat of bishop take of pawn takes f6. If I go with bishop takes g2, he can even play e takes f6 with a tempo threatening my bishop, and then to only force exchanges, like after bishop takes f3, f takes g7. I can't take the pawn because of rook takes e7 check, and in fact after rook f7, I can even take on f3, and then after d5, you will have a certain advantage over here, like d5, and I have a very bad position. Rook e6 is coming. So I saw all of this, and I decided that if I want to really manage to promote a successful attack, I don't have to exchange pieces. Neither I have to open up the center with something like d takes e5. When white takes knight takes e5, the queen g6 could follow, as well as the bishop is opened, and a lot of additional threats will follow, and I can't do anything, actually. After the bishop takes and king takes, my piece are unprepared. g4 could be met by the simple g takes f, one check, and that's it. Nothing more. If I go with knight h5, white can even play rook e3, and with just a couple of moves, he's gonna take away all the threats that I could eventually create, and nothing will actually happen. I don't have enough pieces to promote any threats, and white is defending with much more. So from previous lectures, we know that for a successful attack, we always need to have more pieces attacking against the opponent than the opponent's protecting pieces. So right now, after e5, I decided to once again not to care what he's doing and play knight to g4. So knight to g4 was played, and in this position, in reality, there are a lot of very strong threats. Now, already doesn't seem to be anything particular, and that is what my opponent thought. Okay, if you play such kind of game against, let's say, an intermediate player or even a candidate of master, he will be a bit confused and maybe he will fear a little bit from those pieces. But if you play it against international or grandmaster, he simply knows that this is not so correct, just because this attack was unprepared at all. Like without development of my pieces, without really to finish the opening stage and connect my rooks, I'm starting with direct threats against the white king, and maybe not direct threats, but I'm just representing my pieces over there without to have anything particular. So I'm sacrificing anything, the center, the materials you will see, just in order to get my pieces over there, and no obvious threats can be seen. So what's the point behind it? The point is a very important principle that I want to tell you about, and this is the exact principle about the piece fist. So this can be used as one of the major opportunities to develop an attack, and let me tell you what it means. A piece fist against the opponent's king could actually promote very dangerous threats, and it literally means many pieces, like say 3 or more, employed right in front of the opponent's king which you're attacking. So after knight g4, already I have 1, the bishop on h3, 2, the knight, 3, the queen, and maybe the rook on f8, which could be opened after f takes g, 4 pieces right in front of the white king. So I already have this piece fist. Now, the strength of the piece fist, like 3 or more pieces represented right in front of the opponent's king, is that even if there are not obvious threats, they will come. Just because you can't always watch over what these threats are, or these pieces can threat, and by interacting one to each other, they can sooner or later create those really awesome threats against that king. So a piece fist is always the most important thing that we can consider when attacking the opponent king. So if you manage to employ a piece fist, even if your attack is not looking so successful, sooner or later some threats will pop up, just because those pieces have this potential. So if you find how they can interact together, if you consider the possible motives that you can get with them, it's certainly meaning that sooner or later you can use them and employ really successful attacks against your opponent. So now after knight g4, my opponent didn't watch too carefully, and in fact nothing obvious can be seen. If I take on g2, what is just going to recapture? If I take on g3 later on, what can recapture with the h or f pawns, and I don't have anything. h2 is protected by the king and the knight, and if I sacrifice against the knight with rook takes f3 probably, what has the other knight on d2 with which he can recapture? So that's it. This variation wouldn't really give me anything particular. So what I decided was in this position to play something else. I decided that I have to set up some pieces in the game, and in reality, after knight g4, white decided to play e takes d5, e takes d6, and after e takes d6, in this situation, he already has the open file. So he decided to use his chance, and just before I play something like knight d7 or maybe knight c6 and then double up the rooks like rook f7 up to rook f8, he decided to play rook e7. And this move, as you can see, creates a double threat. First of all, it threats on c7, and the second, white has the idea to exchange the bishop on h3 and then actually use the g6 square to make an invasion of his queen. So queen g6 will attack my bishop, and of course that pin will be lethal. So what do I have to do over here? Well, in fact, right now we can see one of the major moves that can actually break black's whole disposal, and this is exactly why you should always watch over your king. And when you notice that some piece of your opponent actually stranded over your king, you need to think about how you can eliminate them, exchange, or force them to go back at some point, just because they are creating threats. Like now, after rook e7, the white's threats seem to be very dangerous, and it seems that I don't have anything, but I can introduce more pieces with temples. The move was knight to c6. Now this move threats the rook on e7, but not only, I think this move is particularly strong because of one other reason, and exactly that it points the d4 pawn. Now we see that eventually, if we use the d4 pawn to take it with the knight at some point, literally the h2 pawn will remain without protection, and also the threat that we can create over this square on d4 with our knight and bishop can be really decisive at some point. So this way I'm finishing the opening, and I already have my pieces ready for the attack. So knight c6 is a tempo move, and of course white's only move is rook takes c7 over there. However, right now I had an idea to win, and basically this is the second move after knight to c6. After rook takes c7, I was considering the plan of bishop takes g2, and after king takes g2, f takes g3. In reality, in this position, now there is the threat of knight takes f(h)2, and in fact, if white goes with f takes g2, as you can see, knight e3 check is coming, so white is losing his queen. If he goes with h takes g3, in fact, here is the beautiful combination. Well, there is knight takes f2 coming, and there is a potential threat of, say, something like queen to h3 and then g4. So white is particularly forced to take that knight if he doesn't want to lose the game. Well, if you like, you can even take that knight back to g4 next move if he doesn't take it, and then there are threats like knight e3 check upcoming, so white can't do anything. If he goes now with something like d5, for example, you can play queen h3 check, and after king takes h f2, we have a same combination, like I'm going to show you. This is the basis. So after the sacrifice, there is queen to h2, and literally now, considering that the knight on f3 is pinned to the king, now white doesn't have any chances to protect his position. If he goes with king to f1, then there is rook takes f3 check, and since the queen is pinned, white cannot take it. And if he goes with king e1, then there is queen g1 check, king e2, and the simple rook to e3 is a kind of beautiful checkmate. If white doesn't really do like this, if he chooses to go, say, with queen king to e3, then black can introduce the other rook with a tempo, checking against the white king, and in fact, again, white can't really move up his knight on e4 because the queen is undermined. So eventually, white's only way is to get his king on d3, but then there is knight takes b4, and he loses that queen. In fact, this is exactly the reason why white can't take the knight, and he can't play d5. If he takes the knight, exactly the same thing goes. After queen to h2, king e3, well, king to e1 will be met, king to f1 will by rook takes f3, and king e1 will be met by something like rook a to e8 check, king d1, and then there is even this queen to h1, so the checkmate will be really useful. So we see how he can't go this way, and if he goes on e3, then there is the same. We just introduced the rook, and after king d3, then there is even queen e2 check that will practically checkmate white. So king c3, the rook goes up to e3, and of course we see a beautiful checkmate with two of black's major pieces, the queen and rook, introduced against the white king, and sufficient attack over that. So that's something really bad, and in reality, after knight takes f2, white would have get a really bad position. So I analyzed this position a lot in case white takes, or maybe doesn't take, but it's particularly a bad position. In fact, it seems very good, and I decided to play that, but in this position there are two ways to continue. One is to play bishop takes g2, and the other one is literally to play, instead of this move, f takes g3. Now, during the game, I thought that f takes g3 will actually have less strong ideas, because after bishop takes h3, eventually if I take with my queen, there is like queen to g6 coming, and in fact my king will be in trouble, or maybe even h takes g3 could come, and I don't have anything particular, like knight takes f2 could be met by queen g6 right now. So, but in reality, what is happening is that f takes g3 is strong, because right now after bishop takes h3, there is a move that actually can win black's position. After rook takes f3, practically this move exchanges the white knight on f3 and leaves that spot on f3 unsupported. So when white takes with his knight, well, he can't do anything else. I can take with my pawn on f2 with a tempo check, and white's king cannot either go on f1 or g2 because there is knight e3 coming, and he will lose his queen. Like this way, knight e3, and he loses. So he has to go with king h1, in reality, but then you can go with queen x h3, both attacking on f3 and forcing f2 to f1, a kind of a new queen, and after that knight f2 could be a checkmate, or either white will lose his queen. So that's all very bad, and in the same way the opportunities for black to eliminate the white's protection of his king, and by introducing some 3 pieces into the attack, he can create a lot of dangerous threats. So after f takes g3, white had no other chance but to take h takes g, and after that it all goes with tempo. So threat of g takes f, then threat of queen h1, checkmate, and then practically threat of queen h3. So white didn't have any kind of other moves to play against me. So I went in the wrong way. In fact, as I mentioned, I didn't really feel too good on that game. So I played bishop takes g2, and in fact, after king takes g2, f takes g3, now I don't really thread the check, and what white decided is to play an in-between move of pawn to d5. So this way he's threatening my knight, and the point is that after d5 there is the threat on g7, and after knight e5, as I played, there is this very, very unpleasant move of h takes g, and after knight takes f2 there is this move bishop takes e5. So in fact, at this point, exactly over here, when before to really take on f2, one forced me to play with knight e5. Now he's exchanging the knight, and what I thought in the game is not working. I thought bishop takes e5, but then there is the checkmate from h7. So there is no bishop takes e5, and when I take the bishop right now, a lot of pieces exchanged. So white played the simple rook f1, and actually there is nothing particular. Knight g4, queen d3, and white is getting with not with a material advantage, but of course a strong position, and of course his c7 rook on that file is particularly strong, so he can collect my pawns. For this reason exactly, I missed the winning combination, and I learned a very important principle that could serve to all of you when you're actually intending to attack. When you intend to continue in some combinational way, and you see 2 moves or maybe a couple that will actually go into one and same variation, always choose the one with which you actually leave your opponent less choice. So this way you can go with some forcing move, like with capture, check, or either a direct threats. So that way you limit its possibilities, like I would have do with f takes g3, and in fact that is how you don't really leave him any possibility to surprise you. So even if you have missed something in the previous line, it won't be possible to do it for your opponent, because you will certainly put a threat. So this is very important concept that you can follow. Every move with a tempo limits the opponent's possibilities, and in fact it's a very strong move for the attacking threats. And in the same time, from our lecture today, you can remember that no matter how strong the opponent's defense seems to be, if you get particular amount of pieces right put in front of his king, the threats and combinations will sooner or later come, and they will be stronger than you think. So they will really have a great attacking potential. So this is what you can learn, and I think it will be helpful for you to promote your own attacks in the same way, and exactly find the rightest and of course strongest ways to improve them. So thank you very much, and see you next time.